Heat is here, and we've got multiple ways to measure how hot it actually is. Of course, there's air temperature and there's heat index, once you factor in some humidity. But there's more of an advanced way to look at how hot it actually is and how hot it feels to the human body, to the point where you're trying to register, okay, is it safe to be outside working or having football practice or having a big concert? So the National Weather Service has been updating maps. They have something now called heat stress. It factors in, of course, temperature and humidity, but it also takes a closer look at other things. For example, how intense the sun is. You know, if it's cloudy and hot, if you don't have the sun on you, you can get by a little bit better. But when the sun is on you, it makes a big difference. So it's called heat stress. And this is one of the new maps that's going to be released and has been released. And now we're also showcasing it on WTHR. But anywhere you see a color, that's when you got to think, okay, the heat's getting hot. It's getting to the point where it's uncomfortable, and that's what the green color shows. Once you get to the yellows and oranges and reds and even the dark reds, that's when you get to the zone where the heat could be dangerous and you need to be taking a lot of breaks while you are outside. A lot of water breaks, any way to try to stay cool or to come inside temporarily, because it's not just factoring the heat and humidity, but the intensity of the sun. Technically, there is a term behind all this, and we're going to talk about it. It's called the wet bulb globe temperature. A lot of words and a scary equation. The equation's actually down here. You see a lot of these different terms. We're not going to calculus class. But there's three ways that we kind of look at this. We've got this one with the TW, and that's talking about temperature and humidity, especially humidity in the water and the atmosphere. Then you got this TG, that's talking about how intense the sun is on the human skin. And there's another one, this TA, that's just talking about normal air temperature. So we'll get away from the math, and this is essentially what we're looking at. We've got air temperature, of course, and we've got humidity, and when you put those together, we've got the heat index, which is a very important tool for us. But now let's take it a step further. We're going to factor in wind, and we're also going to factor sun intensity. What's the angle of the sun? How much is it burning down on you? Kind of related to the UV index as well. You can combine all these numbers and all these factors to get a better view on how hot it is. For example, on the wind. If you don't have any wind and it's just swampy and sticky outside, that's miserable. But if you can get the wind to start moving, that helps things out a lot. It actually helps you sweat a little bit better and can cool you off. So all these factors are important when you're trying to figure out how hot it is. So we're going through the weeds here, but this is important because wet bulb globe temperature is something that more schools, more universities, and more athletic events are using in order to figure out, should we have this practice or not, or do we need to delay practice, or do we cancel this game, or do we push back the game, or even a concert. So we got a couple different levels here, and this is all coming in from the National Weather Service. You've got this low category with the yellow. Once you hit an 80 or 85 for the wet bulb globe temperature, every hour, they suggest you take about 15 minutes worth of breaks. Now, you don't have to take them all at once. We can kind of scatter them throughout that hour. And of course, as the wet bulb globe temperature gets higher, which means you've got more heat and more humidity, more solar intensity, you should start thinking about a few more breaks. So for example, if the wet bulb globe temperature is 85 to 88, you're taking generally 30 minutes for every hour, and you can see how it goes up. Some schools and some states have now set a parameter for the whole state. For example, Iowa. Up there, they have now a rule, once you hit 92 for a wet bulb globe temperature, practice is done, games are done. You've got to wait until it drops below 92. 92 is up there. Once you even get to 90, the heat is intense, and it's advised that you take a lot of water breaks every hour. So something to keep in mind when we're trying to figure out, can we have practice or not? So what schools are doing is they're looking at the heat stress or that wet bulb globe temperature. Once you get into the extreme category, that's when schools start making decisions on whether they have practice or not. So when we're taking a look, we're still in early summer, so we're not quite to the extreme category yet, but schools are taking a look hour by hour on how the wet bulb globe temperature is doing. I know it's a mouthful, but for example, for a day that's generally in the 80s and not too humid, you're going to be fine. We're in this green category. We're fine. Of course, it's warm. You want water breaks as much as the coach is going to let you. But it's hot, but it's still doable. But what we're also doing is not just looking hour by hour, but we can take a rough estimate of how things are going to look all the way through the week. So we're not just looking at temperatures, but we're also guessing what the wind's going to be like, what the solar intensity is going to be like, what the humidity is going to be like day after day. And when we get into these heat waves, you're going to start to notice upticks on that wet bulb globe temperature, getting towards the moderate category and talking about more of that heat. So wet bulb globe temperature, it's a mouthful, but it's a more accurate representation of how hot it feels. So for example, if you're outside and it's super cloudy, but it's really hot and humid, of course it's still miserable, but it's more doable if the sun's not beaming down on you. But when the sun is high in the sky, the solar radiation, how much output of energy the sun is beaming down at you, increases as the sun gets higher and higher. So generally, afternoons, early evenings are when the wet bulb globe temperature will be at its highest, and something that we'll watch, and something that Indiana schools and universities and sporting events are taking a closer look at to figure out, is it safe to have this practice or game?